If I have a criticism of the national team over the last 5 years, it's been that they haven't played against top competition, and I think that impacts the ability of the team to really improve and be much more competitive against the top teams in the world.
Welcome back into your favorite Average and Good podcast. Call what you want. I'm Jimmy alongside Chuck and our very special guest, Bruce Arena. What's up, Bruce?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are you today?
Great to see you.
Good.
As always. Thank you for your time. So first and foremost, which one of us was the better player, Chuck? I mean, Bruce, me or Chuck? What would you? No pressure.
Well, both of you were very good players, so
I love that.
I'm picking a side.
I appreciate that. I put you right on the hot seat.
He's got
wisdom. He's got wisdom. It coming out of his ears, Chuck. Okay. So getting right into it, you took over the San Jose Earthquakes, Bruce, who unfortunately, as one of my former clubs, were last in 2024, haven't had a playoff win since 2010. What can we expect from you and the club in this upcoming season in MLS?
Well, clearly we want to be an improved team in 2025, and it's going to take a lot of work. You know, the league has grown tremendously over the last 3 or 4 years. The investment clubs are putting into players today is unprecedented, and we're a little bit behind. Obviously that's why I'm here. The team finished 29th out of 29 teams, so I'm not predicting we're going to win the MLS Cup this year, but we want to get better. I think we've improved the roster, but we have a long way to go. In preseason, I'm getting to know the players. The players are getting to know me and my staff, and we're trying to figure out to this day what's the best way for this team to play, formation-wise, tactic-wise. Who are the best 11 to put on the field? We're now about a week away from opening up against Real Salt Lake, who I think are one of the better teams in the Western Conference. So there's a lot of work ahead for us, but I'm excited about the challenge and look forward to this season.
Good segue into Real Salt Lake in that match, because last season it felt like San Jose only had Christian Espinoza going forward. That's it. And he's super talented, but can't do it by himself. You bring in Christian Arango, former RSL player, and Josef Martinez, two clinical goal scorers. And I think they're probably coming in at different points in their career, but it seems like, Bruce, you're very good at finding these gems of veterans who still have something left in the tank, and that you can motivate them, let them play with freedom, and get the most out of them for the team. So in saying that, what have you seen so far from Arango and Martinez, and how do you see them? Do you see them playing together? How do you see them kind of working out in the attacking third?
Well, they've had a terrific attitude in preseason. They're a little bit behind fitness-wise, but they've worked really hard and doing a good job. And they complement each other. They're getting to know each other both on the field and off the field. And they're talented guys. And we're lucky to have them. And I think in time you're going to see that they're going to be pretty special. You combine them with Espinoza, who's a very good player. Lopez is a young player that we're trying to get him up to speed in terms of being a playmaker for us. So we have some potential in the attacking end of the field. Defensively, we have to be improved. It was the poorest team in MLS last year, and probably in the history of the league, conceding 78 goals. That's way too much. We have a good goalkeeper in Danielle, and I really believe we have a good group of center backs. So hopefully over time, we can get that group organized in the right way where we're, pretty tough in the defensive end of the field. That's going to be important. I think as the season goes on, we'll be a more dangerous team going forward. We'll get some goals, hopefully, out of Martinez and Arango and Espinoza, and hopefully we'll be better defensively. But there's a lot of work ahead.
Yeah, well, we think you're the best guy for the job, Bruce. We're excited to see how you do. Let's talk a little bit about some new rules that are happening in MLS, which seems to happen every year at MLS. This is the intra-league trading rules. We're starting to see teams that can buy other players. Dejan Joveljic just went to Kansas City for $4 million. You have Jack McGlynn went from Philadelphia to Houston. We're hearing Lucho Acosta to Dallas and Evander to FC Cincinnati. How do you feel about these rules overall? I feel like it starts to give, in some ways, makes the league a little bit more intriguing, because you can have kind of normal trading rules that we see in other American sports leagues.
I think it's good. We've been interested in that as well. We've looked to buy a player, fell short and all, but I think anything we can do in the league to have a greater investment in players is a big plus, and it's certainly a different strategy in MLS, but the owners obviously support it, so that's fantastic. I think you're going to see over the next week some other moves by clubs and buying players. So it's going to be interesting, and I think in the end it's going to make the league better and much more competitive.
Couldn't agree more with you. I'm a big fan of it. So hopefully we start to see more teams taking risks and spending right and in the right way. What are your thoughts on the U.S. Open Cup? Because there's 16 MLS teams in it. Has it lost some of its magic?
Well, I think it's an important competition. We have a lot of competitions now in the summer months. That's the only competition we're in, so it's going to be important for us. But I think that's a competition we can't allow to disappear. And hopefully, this year we'll have a good competition. We'll get a good champion, and hopefully it's an MLS team. And what can you say? I think you're going to see eventually that the league may move towards the international calendar, and that'll change things a lot as well. But I think the U.S. Open Cup is important to maintain.
I love it. You're speaking my language, Bruce. I love it. So it's another cup competition to another one. Leagues Cup has just been introduced over the last couple of years. San Jose is not entering it into 2025. Was that due to schedule congestion, or maybe now with the new rules, you have to be the top 18, right? One of the top 18.
Yeah, and it has to do likely with congested schedule, because you can't fit all of these dates and games in for 30 MLS clubs. So they had to make a cutoff at some point and have an agreement, obviously, with the Mexican League. And at the end of the day, fair enough. I can't complain about it.
Do you like the competition with regard to the Leagues Cup, Bruce, with just having, because I know for a long time, even when me and Chuck were cutting our teeth in the league, there was always this desire to want, because it's a natural rivalry with Mexico. So can we lean into that a little bit? Do you like what you've seen so far from the Leagues Cup?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just a matter of figuring out how many clubs are going to be in it, when you're going to play the competition, how you deal with that in the MLS schedule. There's a lot of factors that complicate that competition, and the league shuts down for a fair amount of time. I think this year the clubs that are only in the U.S. Open Cup will be playing when that competition's moving on as well. So it'll be an interesting time in June and July, I guess, is the timing for the competition. And we'll see. But I think it's been good for the MLS clubs to be in that competition and see how they fare against these top Mexican clubs, because the top clubs in Mexico are very good, and it's been a real positive to see how our top teams can compete with them.
Bruce, there was a great moment during the January camp broadcast where it was a shot of you and Greg Berhalter, two former U.S. men's national team coaches, sitting together, chatting, watching the current U.S. men's national team. How have you assessed Mauricio Pochettino's tactics and the way that the team's played so far? What have you liked? What do you want to see more of?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think the competition's been good enough to make any kind of assessment. And playing games in January is not a good way of measuring where the team's at. I think you'll obviously see more this year, and hopefully in 2026, the lead up to the World Cup should be a schedule against top flight teams. If I have a criticism of the national team over the last 5 years, it's been that they haven't played against top competition, and I think that impacts the ability of the team to really improve and be much more competitive against the top teams in the world. But having said that, I think playing at home is going to be a huge advantage, and I'm sure by the time the World Cup begins, the U.S. team will be prepared to get out of group play, perhaps get to the quarterfinals and really challenge to see if they, our dream always is, can we get to the semifinals of a World Cup? And once you're there, it's anybody's game. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's certainly too early to make a judgment, not only on the coach, but the team as well. But there's a lot of talented players. These players that are playing in Europe are having really good seasons. I think there's some quality players in MLS. So hopefully the coach can mix and match the right way. And by the time the World Cup comes around, we're going to be a very competitive team.
I know January camp is tough to assess with the quality, but was there any U.S. players that were given a chance that you were like, oh, they did pretty well, or I didn't know they had this level in them?
To be honest with you, I just don't think the competition's good enough in those games to make a real judgment. I'm just trying to be fair about it. I've been in that situation
Yeah.
before, and you cannot use that as a measuring stick in terms of are those players that are going to help us beat Argentina or Brazil
It's a
or Holland?
lose-lose.
It's
It's one of those tough positions.
difficult to
'Cause
make
if you
those
do
kind of
well, it
assessments
doesn't
and
matter. If you
predictions
do bad,
beforehand.
you're out.
Yep, exactly.
Now, Bruce, I remember in the lead up to the 2006 World Cup, I remember you being frustrated that we didn't have stiffer competition going into that tournament. And one of our last send-off games was against Latvia. And even though we could still derive some type of information about the best collection of guys or what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, no matter who the opponent is, I remember you being frustrated. So I can still feel that.
Yeah, the competition leading up to that was lousy. The 3 games we played here in the U.S.
Yeah.
If I had to do it again, I would have just placed the team in Europe and played some of the European teams.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, and I appreciate that insight. Now with the World Cup here, and obviously you were around for 94 and took charge ahead of 2002. What can the sport, and maybe MLS, if you want to just focus on MLS, what can we do, or how can we galvanize growing this sport in this country? This is a huge moment to really kind of put the sport on steroids ultimately, right? Hit the gas pedal, whatever the metaphor is there.
Well, we just got out of a Super Bowl, which everyone in the world gets excited about. But I think the World Cup in our sport is the absolute competition in the world. And this time around, when you compare to 94, we're much prepared for a World Cup in terms of the quality of our team, where the sport is today in this country. It's in a much better shape than it was obviously in 94. And we're going to host a great competition because we're going to have real stadiums and real fields. Everything's going to be top flight. That's something we didn't have in 94, and there was a criticism for that. So I think we're going to be able to host perhaps the finest World Cup in our history, and we're going to have a team that's going to be able to compete. So I think it's going to be fantastic. And then the after effect of that World Cup is I think some of the great players in the world are going to want to play in MLS. Players, when I run into players from around the world, they're all excited about coming to the U.S. and they'd love to play here. And I think by 2027 or 2026, our league is going to be prepared to take on some of these great players that are in their prime, not players that are in their early 30s, mid 30s. I think we're going to see some real elite players choose to come to MLS. So it could be a real exciting time for the sport in this country.
Bruce, every time on this podcast, it feels like Jimmy has to, get it across that he had this shtick of like being a late bloomer and
I was a late bloomer,
grinding and clawing. Yeah, clawing his way to the World Cup in 2006. Can you give us your point of view of Jimmy's trajectory to that roster? What was he a sure thing? Was he last minute, inclusion? Like, what was it for you?
Well, he wasn't our number one player. He wasn't the first name we put on the board. But he was a good player and a good teammate. And the World Cup is real testing times. The lead up to the World Cup, how challenging it is, and then how competitive it is inside the team. And everyone needs to know their place, and not to say that Jimmy didn't have a place. He was very competitive. He was a great teammate, and he got a sniff during the World Cup. So
I did.
Hey, let's go. Is there any current player now, center back in the league, that you go, oh, he's similar to Jimmy?
Hmm, interesting. I don't think there is anyone similar to
Thank
Jimmy,
you.
to be
I
Exactly
was
honest.
gonna
right.
say Walker
That's
Zimmerman,
right.
good old
And
Walker
I'm
Zimmerman,
not sure
Jimmy.
there's any Charlie Davies around either. So,
Ah, there we
Oh,
go.
you guys,
That's a
every
compliment.
player is unique. I really believe that, and it's really important to pick the right players uh, to make your team work. And I think Jimmy was one of the guys that we felt could could add something to our roster, and he did. So I'm proud of how Jimmy contributed to that team, and hopefully he has continued success in his career, not only as a broadcaster, but I know that he's has an interest in coaching as well.
I do. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. Thank you for the
well
nice
done.
words.
If
So,
the first thing you should work on is coaching Charlie. If you can do that, you can coach anybody.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. I'm taking that with me. So we asked, or Charlie's asking, who's comparable to me or himself. Is there any Bruce Arenas out there? Any future Bruce Arenas? Anybody that you see has the
There are a
chops?
lot of good there are a lot of good coaches in our league, and you know the American coaches. If you look, you mentioned Greg Berhalter. Greg's a very good coach. Steve Sharundle is doing a great job with LAFC. Greg Vanny at the Galaxy. Uh, the old timer Peter Vermees is always going to be there in Kansas City. He does a remarkable job, and I
Bruce,
think
we
it's a great.
actually we actually talked about Pat Noonan because
Yeah,
I was been pleasantly
Pat is
surprised with Pat.
excellent. I mean,
Yeah.
I think their coaching staff in Cincinnati is terrific. The way uh, an experienced guy like Dominic supports that coaching staff, it's been fantastic. Uh, Pat's special. He's done a remarkable job in Cincinnati, and I think you're going to hear some real interesting news for Cincinnati in the next week as well. So that's a
Oh wow.
franchise that doesn't accept anything from except being the best. They want to win an MLS Cup, and they work real hard to do that. So that's a very good coaching staff. We have really good American coaches now.
I like
I'm
that
really proud
ambition.
of that.
Yeah, I
Was
like
that
that.
Bruce, I'm a little disappointed that Tony Meola is not here to join us because I know your relationship with him goes way back. So what was a young Tony like at UVA? What did you see in him that you said, I gotta get this kid here, and
well,
how did he kind of impress you throughout?
he was in his prime. He was an absolutely fabulous athlete, and the '94 World Cup was very impressive. I had him for a couple of years at UVA, and he was special, and he's extremely bright, extremely athletic. I think if Tony really zeroed in and focused on being uh, the best goalkeeper, not only in the United States but among the best in the world, he could achieve that. I think his baseball and football dreams conflicted, and his acting conflicted with that a little bit. But it was also a time where the sport wasn't where it is today. And I think if Tony Meola uh, was playing today, he'd be considered one of the great goalkeepers in the world, not only in our country. But he was special, and I think he probably looks back saying, maybe I could have focused a little bit more on being a goalkeeper. But he
He
was,
shouldn't have tried to be Steven Seagal's backup. It's just
That's
crazy,
no, or kicking for
you
the
know?
Jets. That's like
yeah.
bad life decisions.
It's hard to do all that stuff, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
tried, and his acting, and he was on Broadway, and all of that stuff. So, uh, I'm proud of Tony. He's grown into a remarkable person, and I think he's got a lot of bright things ahead of him.
Well, Bruce, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today on Call What You Want. We wish you the best of luck with the Earthquakes
Thank
this
you.
season, but especially in that first game against Real Salt
Thanks,
Lake.
and,
So,
No,
Bruce
no,
Arena,
I look
everybody.
forward. I look forward to you
What?
coming to New England for that San Jose Revs game.
Isn't that
Ooh.
an interesting game that MLS scheduled? That's
Yes,
surprising how
Yes.
they even thought about that, isn't it?
I'll be in the broadcast booth
Yeah.
watching.
All right.
That
I
should be
might
a
be
good
there
one.
with you.
Look at you getting to the end of the video. All right. Very proud of you. Now, if you want more average to good content, this is your channel. Go look at other videos, playlists. We have it all figured out. For more of the good stuff, then you got to make sure you hit like on this video, hit subscribe so you don't miss anything, and then turn on your notifications so you know when we're going live or if anything drops right when it comes out. we'd really appreciate it. See you next time.